Hi folks, I'm Bill Vales. I'm here today with Tony DeAngelis for another edition of Littleton Rocks. Tony, we just completed a show on plate tectonics, trying to lay a little bit of a framework for what we're going to talk about now, which is the geologic time scale.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Tony's a lifelong student of geology, minerals, rocks, paleontology, and a variety of other subjects. I really appreciate you having us into your laboratory.
As I say, I enjoy it so much, so it's not a chore for me, it's enjoyment.
Yeah, it's you have magnificent collections. Your knowledge is deep, and we really appreciate coming here. So last time we spoke a little bit about plate tectonics. We wanted to give the general framework for one of the big ticket items that control the Earth,
Right. Mm-hmm.
and contribute to the environment. And you had mentioned in the last show the amount of time that we have to cover. You want to go through the time period that we have to cover?
Well, as you know, they say that the Earth is estimated to be 4.6 billion years from
Billion with a B.
Yeah, from inception to the present. Okay, and when you get into that and you start talking way back into deep time, I just did the calculations. The Cambrian, they say, started about 543 million years ago. And that's when there was the Cambrian Explosion, life proliferated. Before that, there was probably some life, we'll talk about that, but the extent of Precambrian time was 88% of the total timeline, which is an immense amount, where, you know, there was formation going on, there were continents rising, and there was volcanism and all kinds of strange stuff. And they think there was primitive life there, mostly unicellular. And even that is debated. One of the fossils that I had illustrating that is this small piece called what's called a stromatolite.
Stromatolite.
And that's from Australia, and that's supposedly 3.4 billion years old.
3.4 billion years old.
Right, and there's debate about that from scientists as to whether that was a true life form or whether it was a geological formation. There is debate, so we don't know, but take from what is known today and looking at living stromatolite formation, they pretty much think that yes, this was a living thing, and the creatures that made it were unicellular. There may have been something the size of Montana or a map of these things, but it was still unicellular organisms that produced this.
You want to zoom in on this to get a good shot?
I know it's sad,
This is
sad to say it's very small, right?
In 3.43 billion years old, and from Pabara, Australia,
Right.
the Streley Pool Formation.
Okay. All right. Well, this was from early life, so let's give some framework of this huge expanse of time. 4.6 billion years old to the present. So how do we wrap our heads around it? Well, one way that helps us understand this expanse of time is to divide up the time into different areas.
Right.
Okay?
And that was the development of the geologic time scale.
Okay, the geologic time scale. And that division of time was done based on what?
Well, first of all, what they tried to do was to figure out, after they figured out what went where, it's sort of like based on extinction events, because once life had taken hold and was going along doing its thing, at various times there were major extinction events where, say, half of everything that lived was wiped out.
Mm-hmm.
And there were 5 major extinction events. And so the most that everybody's familiar with was the extinction of the dinosaurs, our friends from the past. You know, those, and going back though, there were others. There was one at the end of the Triassic. There was the Permian extinction, which I believe was the largest, if I remember right. And that took out like 90% of everything.
Of all species.
Of all species.
Yeah, so there was a great loss in diversity.
Yes,
Okay.
but
great
it
loss
did
in-
clear the way for other things to come.
Absolutely.
But I think one of the things that people have to be made aware of, because most of them may not, I mean, they can see these fossils, but most of the life for a very long time was all marine life.
Mm-hmm.
There was no land life. Not even plants for a good long time.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually plants, moved onto the earth. But it was still a good long while after that before, things came out. The insects, the
Yeah.
giant insects, which give me the willies, and then later the amphibians and so on.
Mm-hmm.
But most of the earlier life was marine based.
Yeah.
And even at that, they still had major extinctions which wiped them out. So being in the oceans didn't really protect them much.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is that around the continents, even though even though they were drifting around and moving, the seas, it seems most of them were very warm and shallow.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where you find some of the stuff that's on the posters. You'll see all the various flora and fauna. And, those were the inland sea, what they call inland seas, and shallow seas with a big profusion of creatures abundant.
Okay. There's a lot of very good charts on the geologic time scale. And the geologic time scale is divided based on life, based on extinction events, based on geological formations, has been divided up and named.
Yes,
There's different names that are given to different periods of time. Mm-hmm. And that helps us organize what happened when and what came before something else.
Yeah, I mean, you need some sort of order, and that's why they had the order of, the largest segment of time, like I say, which only a little bit is known, would be the Precambrian era.
Okay.
Huge slice of time.
Yeah. Now, there's 2 basic types of measuring time. We have the relative time scale,
Right.
which is what we're going to talk about here. And then there's absolute time scale or absolute dating. And that's something that we're going to talk in a future show, and that has to do with using radiometric techniques
Sure.
to really narrow down a date. Many people, when you mention that, they say, oh, you mean carbon dating.
No.
Well, carbon dating's for very recent events.
Exactly.
You can only get back,
what, 20,000 maybe?
20,000 years, maybe even as much as 50,000. But after that,
Yeah.
you can't go back any further with any level of accuracy. But there are some radiometric dating techniques that go back 4.5 billion years.
Mm-hmm. Right, which is as far as you need to go.
But we're going back, we're using relative dating here, and they're both important to understand, and both are used with one another,
Yes.
okay, to help.
Oh, they complement each other vastly, yeah.
So you have a great chart here that the audience is seeing, and there's numerous charts out there, and some are better than others.
Mm-hmm.
And there's various levels of gradation the two major levels of gradation are the eras and then the periods.
Right.
Okay, that's the two major levels. And I see on your chart here, we have the areas, the Cenozoic, starting from most recent,
Right.
working back in time.
Yeah.
We have the Cenozoic, the Mesozoic,
Right.
age of dinosaurs,
Yeah.
the Paleozoic, which is prior to the dinosaurs, and then the Precambrian, and that's the largest expanse
Right.
of time, despite the fact it's given the
Yeah.
smallest
Right. Well, yeah.
space on the chart. And then within each era, we have periods, because
That's
let's
correct.
face it, an era is still a huge expanse of time.
Oh yeah, you could have one that's 300 million years.
Right.
You know.
So you need to get that down
Right.
further. So it further gets broken down into periods. And probably the periods that most of the audience can relate to would be the Cretaceous, Jurassic, and Triassic.
Right.
And
Those are the Mesozoic era. Right.
those are within the
Yeah.
Mesozoic era.
That's the age
And,
of dinosaurs.
and that's the
basically.
age of dinosaurs. But if we went even deeper with a finer granularity, you would find that the Jurassic or any of those periods further breaks down
Oh yeah, they might
in-
have 5 or 6 different.
into divisions.
Mhm.
And then those divisions may even break down into terminology that we talked about, of saying this is the upper Carboniferous, or
Right.
the lower Carboniferous, or the middle Carboniferous.
Right.
So there's a very hierarchical breaking down of these time periods.
That's true.
Okay. But for right now, us dealing with eras and periods, that's close
That-
enough
yeah,
for
it
what we're
is,
going to
really.
be talking about
Right.
here. So we're going to start off at the bottom of the chart, which is in the Precambrian, the largest expanse of time. And the thing I like about this particular chart here is it has some great graphics on it, but it gives you a little bit of a sense of what the world might have looked like then.
Right.
And it gives you the formation, the position of the continents
Mm-hmm.
as understood. And this gets us back to our previous show on plate tectonics.
Exactly.
That the continents are always moving around. And to see this correlation between this time period
Mm-hmm.
and here's where the continent's position, that's very valuable information. And in addition to this, it also shows you the dominant species.
Mm.
Now, of course, we're at the Precambrian.
Yeah, there's not much.
Okay, so there aren't many dominant species,
Right.
but we did show you a picture of the stromatolite, which is in the
Yeah, late Precambrian.
late Precambrian. Now, some extraterrestrial events have occurred through time, and I believe there was an extraterrestrial event that occurred in the
Yes.
Precambrian.
And
Can you talk about that?
yeah, during the time of 4 billion to 3.8 billion years ago, there was a time, it's called the heavy bombardment, and excuse me, there was a profusion of meteorites and asteroid strikes on the Earth. And if you want to see evidence of that, just look out some night with binoculars at the moon, where erosion hasn't taken place in those thousands and thousands of craters. It was the same on Earth. It was getting pummeled. Now, this is all speculation, but some people said, well, life may have come from deep space on these asteroids and stuff and got seeded here. But we're not going to get into that because there's not enough data. But even so, Earth was pummeled with these asteroids and comets and meteorites. And some people, eminent scientists, say that's where some of our mineral deposits today came from. When the Earth formed, most of the iron and nickel and heavier elements went to the core. Okay, so how do we
Meaning
get...
the heavier elements
Yeah.
sank to the core.
Right. So it's where do we get these crustal deposits, and a lot of them they think came from the heavy bombardment. I mean, this is a period of 200 million years, so it wasn't a quickie thing.
Yeah.
It happened for a long time, and Earth was really pummeled, and that could have brought a lot of these things to the, to the surface. So that came with the extraterrestrial ones. Now, I have a sample of meteorite here, if you want to just
Now,
show
one
it.
question I have to
Yeah.
ask you. Actually, I have two questions
go
from
right
what you
ahead.
said. What's the difference between a meteor, a meteorite, and a meteoroid? I've heard all
Okay,
those terms.
right. A meteor, we'll start with that, is the streak of light you see in the sky, a shooting star. Okay? The meteorite, the meteor is burning up by ablation. Okay? It gets incandescent. So that streak of light is the meteor.
That's the meteor, okay?
Meteoroid is what they generally refer to as the piece or chunk of stone or iron that's going through and causing that.
Okay,
The meteorite is what actually hits the Earth.
okay.
So this is a meteorite. It has landed on the Earth, and this is showing the outside, and then it's been cut, polished, and etched with acid.
So, if you can zoom in on this, and this is the side that has the etching on, which we're going to talk about shortly.
Right,
And the other side has not been etched.
right. That's the natural surface.
Now, something I need to say about this meteorite,
Uh-huh.
okay, is it's very heavy.
Right.
Okay, it's small in volume, but it's very heavy.
hmm
Okay.
Yeah, and that's due to the composition. There's two types of meteorites. This one is a nickel-iron meteorite.
Okay.
There are stony meteorites which are much lighter,
Mhm.
and but this is a nickel-iron, which I think most of them are that are found, and that's evident by the weight.
Okay. Can you tell us about this pattern on here? Are you? Can you zoom in on that?
That's as far as I can get.
Okay.
Okay, the pattern is called the Widmanstatten Pattern, and named after a scientist who discovered it. It seems that all meteorites, that is the definitive test for a meteorite, is to cut it and etch it with acid. 1% nitric, I believe, is what they use.
1% nitric acid.
And they
Don't
and-
try this at home.
yeah, right.
Okay.
And they will if they get that pattern, it's definitive. And the pattern sets up from way back in the infant universe when the elements of nickel and iron combined, they crystallized in a particular way. And so this shows it. And it is definitive for all meteorites. If it's really a meteorite, nickel iron, will show that.
Okay.
The stony ones do not.
Okay. If you put that away.
Mhm.
So we have a meteorite occurring here. Use
Oh,
this
okay, yep.
Here. We have a meteorite occurring here on the
And
this is
stromatolites,
a
a little.
Precambrian.
Mhm.
Stromatolite also occurring here. Now, it's interesting to say that there were also meteorite strikes here in the
Right.
Devonian,
Mm-hmm.
I think at the Ordovician,
Mm-hmm.
at
Yeah.
the Cretaceous
That's right, yes.
boundary, but we're going to work our way up, but we're going to leave these two events here. And actually the stromatolite is probably
Yeah.
up around there in that part
I would
of the,
think so. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
so that's very interesting. On meteorites.
Mhm.
Now I always
Yeah,
have to
right,
now
yeah.
slow down when I
Think
say that. Carol and myself, when we were in Arizona years ago, we went out to Meteor Crater, is what they
Right,
call it. Maybe
yes.
they should have called that Meteorite Crater.
Yeah. Well, they never found the full meteorite. They
Yeah.
found fragments, but not the
But
full
we
one.
walked around Meteor Crater, and that was about 1 mile across.
Oh yeah, that's a big hole.
It's a
I've
big
been there,
hole
right.
in the ground, which happened fairly recently, I think on the order of 50,000 years ago,
Mhm.
that strike
That's what they think, right.
occurred. And incredible amounts of power
Mhm.
associated with something hurling in from outer space that,
Right.
relative to the hole, is not all that large.
That's right. I was surprised when we talked with the guide there and how small it actually was. But, you know, evidence for that can be seen just several years ago, the one in Russia. It was
Yes.
not that big, but it caused quite a bit of damage.
Yes.
And that was a tiny thing, but, you know, the speed they're traveling at and such is, you know, part of what imparts its power to that thing.
Yeah. Now, one more question that I had, I feel like we're going to use all our time on the
That's
Precambrian,
okay.
is you mentioned if you look at the moon and you see all the craters on the moon that haven't eroded. Why haven't they eroded?
Well, there's no atmosphere, number one, so a lot of the stuff is left as the astroblems, as they call them, are just there because they haven't been attacked by wind and all of that. Plus, the moon, if it has any tectonic forces left, they're extremely minor, so they're not playing havoc with it. Earth, because we're such a vital planet and things are always happening. You got water, which wears down things. You got wind and atmosphere. You have tectonic forces. So the crater that they think was signaled the end of the dinosaurs is off the Yucatan Peninsula, down below Mexico, wherever that area is.
Yep.
And so, you know, as they find these things, that may have been at land at one time, or it may have been in the water, but you know, the action takes away all of the evidence of a lot of this stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's march up, and we may not go through every period now, but we will fill in the blanks over
Yeah.
time.
Oh yeah. Sure.
We will do that. But actually, let's go to the Cambrian. I see in the Cambrian here we have a lot of interesting life being depicted here. We have some trilobites. Do you have
Right.
any trilobites?
Trilobites are right here. These are, and there are some cephalons on there, but this is a species called Sororus. Yeah, trilobites came out in great profusion in the Cambrian.
This is the Cambrian. So now we're at 543 to 490 million years ago. So we had this large expanse of time that predated that.
Yes.
And now we're in the
A smaller
Cambrian.
segment, right. And
So
in addition to the trilobites,
I also have
Yeah.
a couple trilobites here that'll show them somewhat differently.
yeah, right, that's great, because
But there's a trilobite there. I'll show you what that looks like. This will make a good stop there. And this one I always like because you know
Oh, it's a nodule.
when you're collecting these, they often don't present themselves as, hey, here I am, I'm
I
a
know,
trilobite.
right, yes.
You know, they could be smushed. And
Yeah.
hidden. Well, this here is a trilobite, and if you open it up, you see
Yeah,
the
nice.
positive
Yeah,
and the
dorsal and
negative.
ventral, right, nice.
dorsal and ventral. Yeah.
Mhm.
And explain to the audience what dorsal and ventral is.
Well, the dorsal is what you see, the positive side. The ventral is the other, the opposing side, basically.
I actually did some reading about dorsal and ventral on our recent trip to Calvert Cliffs, where we did some fossil collecting down there of brachiopods.
Oh, nice, okay.
That dorsal and ventral
Mm-hmm.
is very appropriate. You need to understand what's going
Yeah,
on.
oh yeah, you do.
Different sides. Okay, so these are examples.
Yeah, and you know, in that time there were jellyfish which don't leave much behind, but
Soft body.
soft-bodied, but there
Yeah.
were corals and sponges and some other stuff.
Corals, and here's
Yeah.
how a coral might present itself.
Mm-hmm, right.
Okay, this is a coral.
Yeah, it looks very much like that in the, and, yeah, there was a whole profusion of stuff out there. The Cambrian Explosion, as they called it, was the big diversification. The trilobites, I believe, the earliest trilobites were the first really successful group of multicellular animals.
Mhm.
And as they were hard-bodied, they they offer a lot of material for study, and that's something else we can just mention briefly. A lot of what you see, the trilobites were like lobsters. They molted, so when they grew too big, their shells split or got expelled, and they came out and with the newer, bigger shell. So a lot of the times when you see fragmented trilobites, it's not necessarily because they were attacked by a predator. It's because they broke out and developed a new shell.
You sent me some email the other night with a great word in it.
Oh, boy.
That people use in place of molting. Can you remember what that is?
Oh, gee, I forget now. Was it?
Excavia?
Yeah, oh boy, you got me. I just looked at it this morning too. We'll have to get back to that.
Yeah, but molting tells the story.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so there's some
Fossils that illustrate that. So now we're going to go up a little further in time to the Ordovician
Right.
period. And we see here that the continents were in a different position.
Yeah, as they were changing.
Okay.
The ice caps were a little bit larger than as the thing shows.
Yes.
So that maybe lowered sea level a bit. And as I said, the warmer, shallow seas had helped the, the diversification of life.
So that would have lowered sea level because the water got locked up in the ice cap.
In the ice caps, yeah.
Okay, and that lowered sea level. So let's look a little at some of the life forms we would have seen in the Ordovician.
Right. Now there were still a lot of trilobites, tons of trilobites.
Yeah. So trilobites cross this barrier, but these things here,
Yeah.
I believe, are Orthoceras.
Okay, I remember you mentioned that.
Orthoceras, and I happen to have here a
Mm.
couple polished examples
Nice.
of Orthoceras.
Right. Showing the shells, right?
Okay, and these are polished examples. Some
Mhm.
people show the polished example.
Okay, so I'm going to put those here. And these Orthoceras and trilobites also cross into the
Right, yeah.
Silurian.
Mhm.
Okay, so we'll use this trilobite to cross that boundary too. How many species of trilobites were there?
There are between 15 and 20,000 species. There were many, many families. In fact, I have here, which we can't go through, but a listing and just of the, to give them some idea of the families in the Cambrian period. It's so huge. And then in the Ordovician, nearly as huge.
These are the families of trilobites in the Cambrian period.
Yeah, and then this is the Ordovician
Okay,
period.
so you go up to this one.
Yeah.
And these are families, which within a family,
Oh, yeah.
there's species.
Right.
Okay, so these were a very prolific.
They were. They were one of the most successful things to
animal.
inhabit the earth.
Okay. All right. Well, as predicted, we did not get
No, not too far.
far. We're up to the Silurian, and
Now, the Silurian period had of course, it's a profusion of trilobites, but it also had the big profusion of crinoids.
Crinoids,
And
okay.
crinoids are something we discussed before. It looks like a plant, but it is actually an animal. It has a root system, a holdfast, which anchors it to the sea floor.
Okay, and here's an example of a crinoid.
That's the root system.
This is an animal. This is the root system of the crinoid.
And this is basically the stem and the top, the bulb. And
Yes.
those feathery arms capture little detritus and things floating down that it feeds on.
So this would have actually been,
Yeah, just like that,
Like
right?
that.
Yep, coming
you
up.
know, and this is
Yeah.
waving around in
Yes,
the,
right, just floating in the warm currents.
in the water. So we're going to put this on the Silurian.
And there were many, many species like that. Hundreds, well actually into the thousands for crinoids as well.
Okay. So what we're going to do here is we're going to call this a wrap on the
Okay.
Silurian. And we're going to pick it up from the Silurian. I'm going to put that like that. And we're going to leave this just like this.
Hmm.
And even though it seems like we didn't cover much, we covered about 4 billion years
That's right, yeah,
of,
right.
of Earth history and life, so that really wasn't too bad. I hope that you found this informative. We're going to come back in another show, and we're going to march a little bit further through this time scale, and we look forward to you joining us again. Thank you.